Years ago, my stepmom manipulated my dad into kicking me out of the house to make room for my pregnant stepsister. Now, after losing everything and being left with no one, my dad is homeless, full of regret, and desperately begging me for help while she and her daughter moved on without him. It began at a meal with my father, my stepmother Cecilia, and my stepsister Dawn. My father cleared his throat and stated they needed to discuss something significant with me. Before he could even complete his thought, Cecilia interjected. She declared they required my bedroom for Dawn and her spouse Robert, as Dawn was expecting. Initially, I actually chuckled, assuming it was some peculiar jest. I had resided in that room my entire existence. My mother and I had painted the walls together when I was 10. All my memories are contained within that space. Yet, when no one else shared my amusement, I understood they were serious. I attempted to remain composed. I reminded them that I had been contributing to household expenses for the past 2 years while attending university. I was paying rent, assisting with utility costs, even purchasing groceries occasionally. Cecilia's complexion turned a frightening shade of crimson. She slammed both hands onto the table, causing all the dinnerware to jolt, and rose so swiftly her chair toppled backward. She pointed her finger directly at my face and began shouting about my selfishness and ingratitude, how Dawn needed the area more than I did, and how I was old enough to live independently. My father simply remained seated throughout, pushing his food around his plate as if it were the most captivating object in the world. Dawn wore a faint smirk. I realized she had been aware of this plan. They had likely orchestrated everything before dinner. I suppose I should provide some context here. My mother passed away when I was 12 after a prolonged struggle with cancer. She was the type of mother who tucked surprise notes into my lunch and never missed a single baseball game. After her death, my father was adrift. He immersed himself in his work at the law firm and I barely saw him. Then he encountered Cecilia at a work event when I was 13, and they married less than a year later. Dawn came to live with us and suddenly I had a new family, whether I desired one or not. Things were acceptable for the initial few months. Cecilia endeavored to create a picture of a happy family, decorating the house and preparing large Sunday dinners. But it did not endure. She started making subtle remarks at first. How untidy teenage boys are, how much space I occupied, how Dawn required more room for her belongings. Then the comments became more direct. She would speak about how I was mature enough to live on my own, how I was hindering Dawn from experiencing the childhood she deserved, how I was a financial burden on them, despite my father's successful position at the law firm. I genuinely tried to make it work. I kept my head down, studied diligently, and achieved good grades. When I turned 16, I secured a part-time job at the local grocery store and began contributing to household expenses, even though it wasn't required of me. I thought perhaps if I demonstrated I wasn't a burden, things would improve. They did not. If anything, Cecilia grew worse. She would search my room when I was at school, claiming she was cleaning, but truly just seeking reasons to complain. She would turn off the hot water while I was showering, asserting I was wasting utilities. She even started scheduling family dinners for times she knew I would be at work, then complained to my father about my constant absence from family time. Last night, when I attempted to reason with them, highlighting that I paid rent and helped with bills, Cecilia completely lost control. She began tossing my dinner plate around, yelling about my ingratitude after everything they had supposedly done for me. Dawn merely sat there with a self-satisfied expression, rubbing her abdomen. I gazed at my father, silently imploring him to speak, to defend me, to be my dad. But he wouldn't even meet my eyes. He just continued to stare at his plate, occasionally nodding at whatever Cecilia was uttering, like a broken bobblehead toy. The father I knew growing up, the man who taught me to ride a bicycle and assisted me with my math homework, seemed to have vanished entirely. I tried to reason with them. My voice trembled, but I persisted. I explained that I was still in college with 2 years remaining, that I had been faithfully paying rent each month, that this was my home too. I spoke about how I had been working part-time at the grocery store to help with expenses, how I maintained good grades despite working. But Cecilia was not listening to any of it. She interrupted me mid-sentence, her voice as frigid as ice, stating I had until morning to pack my belongings and depart. That's when I lost my composure a little. I stood up too, my chair scraping against the floor. I inquired where they expected me to go in the middle of the semester. Cecilia rolled her eyes and remarked, "You should have considered that before being so selfish." Dawn interjected, saying I was ruining her special announcement with my theatrics. I felt as though I was in some bizarre alternative reality where nothing made sense anymore. Finally, I turned to my father once more, practically begging for his backing. He looked up at last, but I almost wished he hadn't. His eyes were vacant, as if he were looking through me instead of at me. He spoke in a quiet, defeated tone, telling me it would be best if I found my own place since Dawn required stability for her baby. Those words felt like a physical blow. I couldn't help it. I brought up the promise he made to my dying mother. I was there in the hospital room when he held my mom's hand and swore he would always care for me. He flinched when I mentioned it, but Cecilia intervened again, screaming about how I was manipulating the situation. How dare I bring that up, how I was attempting to guilt-trip them. I've been residing in my car since this morning, parked behind the college library. I had to miss my classes today to figure out what to do. My entire existence is in my 2008 Honda Civic, whatever I could fit, anyway. I spent hours contacting everyone I could think of. My mom's sister disconnected the call as soon as I explained the predicament. My uncle said I needed to mature and cease causing problems. My grandparents stated they were too elderly to handle family drama. No one wants to assist. I don't have many friends because I dedicated most of my time to working and studying. The few I possess are all living in dorms or with their parents. I have some savings from my part-time job, but it's nowhere near sufficient for an apartment deposit. I've been working at a local grocery store, earning just enough to cover my portion of the bills and tuition. The most disheartening part is that Dawn doesn't even need my room. Their house has 4 bedrooms. My room, Dawn's room, my parents' room, and a guest room. But Cecilia insists they need 2 rooms for the baby, one for the nursery and one for Dawn and Robert. It's merely a pretext to get rid of me, and everyone realizes it. I'm currently sitting in my car, parked behind the library, utilizing their Wi-Fi to compose this. I had to leave most of my belongings behind because I couldn't fit everything in my vehicle. When I tried to return for the rest of my possessions this afternoon, Cecilia had changed the locks. My father texted saying I could retrieve my things when they were home, but only if I accepted their decision without argument. I simply cannot believe my father chose his stepdaughter over his own son. I don't know what to do. I have work tomorrow morning and I don't even have a place to wash. Update 1. Living in a car is far worse than I ever imagined. The past 2 weeks have been an absolute nightmare. After my previous post, I spent 3 days frantically calling every relative I could conceive of. Each call was more degrading than the last. My father's brother, Uncle Steve, actually laughed when I explained my predicament. He made a remark about how this generation desires everything handed to them, then told me I was old enough to resolve things independently. This is the same uncle who resided in my grandparents' basement until he was 35. I even attempted to reach my mom's best friend, Linda, who used to be like a second mother to me. She would take me for ice cream after mom's chemotherapy sessions, and allow me to weep in her car where dad couldn't observe. But when I called her, she simply kept repeating that she couldn't get involved because her real estate business relied on referrals from my father's law firm. Money matters more than the child she once called her bonus son, I suppose. The harsh reality of being without a home struck hard the first night. I couldn't locate a secure place to park. I ended up in a Walmart parking lot, too terrified to sleep. Every vehicle that passed made me jump. I've been rotating among different parking lots so security doesn't become suspicious. The library during the day for Wi-Fi, the 24-hour gym at night so I can use their showers in the morning, sometimes the park when I require quiet to study. My grades are plummeting. I received a 52 on my economics midterm because I couldn't concentrate, constantly thinking about where I'd sleep that night instead of supply and demand curves. My calculus professor pulled me aside after class to inquire if everything was all right because I dozed off during his lecture. I couldn't tell him I was exhausted from staying awake all night because some individuals were behaving suspiciously around my car. I took on a second employment opportunity at a 24-hour diner near campus. The remuneration is abysmal, and the manager is unpleasant, but they permit us to consume the canceled orders, and I require the funds for an apartment deposit. That's actually where something positive finally occurred. I met Drake, another server there. He observed that I consistently took extra shifts and stayed late to eat leftover food. One slow evening, he inquired about my circumstances, and I ended up disclosing everything to him. It turns out Drake lost both his parents in a car accident last year. He's been living in a small trailer and working full-time while attempting to save money for trade school. When he learned about my situation, he offered to let me stay with him if I divided the rent, stating he could use assistance with bills anyway. It's the first kind gesture anyone has extended to me since this began. Last weekend, I returned to retrieve the remainder of my belongings from the house. That was a particularly agonizing experience. Cecilia shadowed me the entire time, as if I were some sort of criminal, inspecting every box and bag to ensure I wasn't pilfering anything, as if I would want anything from them at this juncture. The most painful part was seeing Dawn in my former room with her Pinterest boards and paint samples, already envisioning the nursery. She was indicating the wall my mom and I had painted together when I was 10, discussing how she desired a cloud theme there. My father was present, but he might as well have been a phantom. He walked directly past me as if I were invisible. I did discover something intriguing, however. Mrs. Chun from next door intercepted me as I was loading the final box into my car. She has resided there since before Mom passed away, and always brings me leftovers when she prepares dumplings. She informed me that Robert had actually moved in 2 weeks before they expelled me. They had been orchestrating this entire scheme for a while. Then she delivered the true bombshell. She overheard Dawn boasting to her friend on the porch about how effortless it was to get rid of me. Apparently, Dawn had been pressuring Cecilia for months to evict me, claiming she needed more space for her expanding family. Mrs. Chun apologized for not alerting me sooner. She handed me a container of dumplings and her phone number, telling me to call if I ever needed anything. The betrayal wounds more deeply than sleeping in my car. When Cecilia first moved in, Dawn and I actually got along splendidly. We would stay up late watching horror films and exchanging anecdotes. She would approach me for guidance about boys, and I would assist her with her math homework. I covered for her countless times when she snuck out to see Robert, lent her money she never repaid, even accepted the blame when she dented Dad's car. I genuinely believed we were friends, perhaps even true siblings. Now I comprehend she was merely exploiting me until she no longer required me. I'm relocating to Drake's trailer tomorrow. It's compact and in a rather rough vicinity, but anything is preferable to my car at this point. I had to withdraw from 2 of my classes because I cannot manage a full course load while working both jobs. The diner employment barely provides enough to cover half the trailer rent, and I need the grocery store job for sustenance and fuel. But I am not abandoning my degree, even if it takes me longer to complete. My father has not called once to ascertain my well-being. The sole communication I've received from any of them is a text from Cecilia yesterday, demanding I alter my mailing address because my college letters are cluttering their mailbox. She concluded it with a smiley face emoji. I did not reply. Update 2. Life has settled into a challenging routine. I'm still cohabiting with Drake in his trailer, working both jobs, and somehow managing to continue my studies part-time. The trailer's heating malfunctioned last week, and the landlord refuses to repair it, so we've been sleeping in layers of clothing. But at least it's a roof over my head. Drake has been instructing me on how to prepare meals with inexpensive ingredients. It turns out you can create many different dishes with rice and beans. However, something transpired last week that once again upended my existence. I was restocking shelves at the grocery store when I encountered Margaret, my father's secretary of 15 years. She has known me since I was a child, used to keep sweets in her desk for when Dad would bring me to the office. When she saw me, she appeared as though she had seen a specter. She attempted to depart swiftly, practically sprinting down the cereal aisle, but then she paused, turned around and returned. She seemed anxious, continuously glancing around as if someone might observe her speaking to me. Then she dropped a bombshell that exacerbated everything. Dawn isn't pregnant. She never was. She and Robert had been attempting to conceive for months, but were unsuccessful. They utilized the pregnancy falsehood to persuade my father to evict me, because they desired my room. Margaret overheard Dawn laughing about it with Robert in my father's office, boasting about how effectively their scheme had functioned. I felt as if I was going to vomit right there in the middle of my shift. All those nights sleeping in my car, abandoning my classes, laboring until my feet felt as though they were bleeding. All because of a fabrication. But that wasn't even the most distressing part. Margaret informed me my father discovered the deception 2 weeks after I departed. 2 weeks. He knew I was sleeping in my car, struggling to survive, all because of a feigned pregnancy, and he did nothing. I couldn't restrain myself. I texted him right there in the middle of my shift. I inquired how he could allow me to remain without a home, knowing Dawn had lied. His reply made me want to scream. He wrote back saying it was inconsequential because Dawn and Robert were trying to have a baby anyway, so they still required the space. He added that I was being overly dramatic about the homelessness because I could have found an apartment if I truly wished to, as if I possessed the funds for first and last month's rent plus a security deposit while attempting to pay for college. Speaking of college, I decided to examine my college fund, the one my mother established before she passed away. She had been saving for my education since my birth, adding to it every month, even when she became ill. The account contained enough to cover my remaining 2 years of tuition. But when I contacted the bank, they informed me the account had been emptied 3 months prior. My father, as the trustee, withdrew everything right around the time Dawn and Robert moved in. The bank representative was actually very kind when she heard my narrative. She retrieved the records and told me my father transferred all the money to a new account. She couldn't disclose precisely where it went, but she did hint that substantial payments were made to several furniture stores and a contractor shortly after they utilized my college fund, the money my dying mother saved for me, to refurbish my old room for Dawn and Robert's fictitious baby. Drake suggests I should report my father for misusing the trust fund. He even located a legal aid office that might be able to assist. But I simply lack the energy for a legal dispute right now. Between my 2 jobs, my remaining classes, and merely attempting to survive, I can barely keep my eyes open most days. The trailer is cold, the neighborhood is rough, and sometimes we can hear gunshots at night. But it's still superior to my car. I did something foolish yesterday. I drove past my former house. There's a large refuse container in the driveway and construction vehicles parked outside. Through the window I could see they've stripped my old room. The walls my mom and I painted together are likely in that dumpster now. I sat there in my car for almost an hour, just gazing at the house, recalling all the times my mom and I baked cookies in that kitchen or completed puzzle games in the living room. It no longer feels like my home. The grocery store manager found me weeping in the stockroom during my shift today. Instead of becoming angry, he sat down with me and listened to my entire account. He's providing me with more hours and shifting me to the day shift so I can pick up additional shifts at the diner at night. It's not much, but it will help. Currently, I'm just concentrating on survival, keeping my head down, working my job, studying when I can. Some days it feels impossible, but I keep hearing my mom's voice in my head, urging me to never surrender. Update 3. It's peculiar how life unfolds sometimes. I never imagined I would update this post again, but something occurred yesterday that brought everything flooding back. These past 7 years have been transformative. I graduated college, it took me 5 years instead of 4, secured an excellent position at an investment firm, and ascended to senior analyst. I married Rose, whom I encountered in my final year of college. She was the barista at the coffee shop where I used to study between shifts. We acquired a house last year, something I never thought achievable when I was sleeping in my car. Drake is also thriving. He completed trade school and now operates his own HVAC business. He was the best man at my wedding. It's humorous how the most dreadful moment of my life led me to one of my closest companions. I heard snippets about my family over the years through former neighbors. Dawn eventually did become pregnant for real and had twins. Mrs. Chun informed me they completely remodeled the house, transforming the guest room into a playroom and my old room into a nursery. She said my father had aged considerably in recent years, ceased maintaining the yard, and barely departs for work anymore. Yesterday my father called from an unrecognized number. I almost didn't answer, but an instinct prompted me to. His voice sounded different. Older, weaker, shattered. He was weeping, something I had only witnessed him do at my mother's funeral. Between sobs, he told me he required my assistance. Apparently, Dawn and Robert had been influencing Cecilia for months, persuading her to transfer the house into their names. They claimed it was a shrewd decision, would save on inheritance tax, and would keep the house in the family for their children. They even engaged their own legal counsel to draft the documents, someone from Robert's family. Cecilia, always easily swayed by Dawn, consented. She transferred ownership of the house to them as a gift for their expanding family. The instant the papers were signed and registered, Dawn and Robert listed the house for sale. They sold it within a week, significantly below market value, for a swift transaction. They removed their belongings while my father was at work, took the twins and vanished. No note, no explanation, nothing. They even emptied the joint account Dawn had with Cecilia, which contained most of my father's retirement savings. Cecilia had added Dawn to the account years ago to help manage household expenses. When my father returned home and discovered the house empty and a sold sign in the yard, he suffered a heart attack right there in the driveway. A neighbor found him and summoned an ambulance. He's currently hospitalized, with no residence to return to, no savings, and no means to cover his medical expenses. Cecilia apparently experienced a complete breakdown when she realized what had transpired. She packed a bag and went to stay with her sister in Florida, leaving my father alone in the hospital. He continued apologizing through his tears, stating he should have never chosen them over me, that he had failed as a father, that he regretted everything. He spoke about how proud he was when he learned of my professional accomplishments through old friends, how he preserved every newspaper clipping when my firm was featured in local business news. He said he drives past my house sometimes just to see how I'm doing but never possessed the courage to knock. He inquired if he could stay with me while he recuperated, saying I was his sole hope. The irony of him now being without a home is not lost on me. A part of me wishes to tell him precisely how it feels, to let him experience what I endured. But I am not that kind of person. I told him I would consider it and ended the call. I then gazed at an old photograph of my mom and me at my 10th birthday celebration. My father took that picture. We were all so joyful then. I keep pondering something my mom used to say, that life has a way of bringing things full circle. 7 years ago, I was the one desperate for assistance, and he turned his back on me. Now he's in the same predicament, requesting the same compassion he refused to extend to me. The question is, should I? Update 4. I spent the past 2 weeks contemplating what to do about my father, discussing it thoroughly with my wife and Drake. My wife, being the compassionate person she is, initially suggested we allow him to stay in our guest room. But the more we deliberated, the more we realized that wasn't the appropriate resolution. Drake reminded me of all those nights in the trailer when I would awaken from nightmares about sleeping in my car. After much consideration, I reached my decision. I settled my father's immediate medical bills. The hospital was threatening to discharge him despite his condition due to non-payment. But I made it clear he could not reside with us. Instead, I contacted Uncle Steve, the one who had laughed when I needed help 7 years ago. I informed him precisely what his brother required and reminded him how he once asserted, family should always assist family. It's amusing how quiet he became when I brought that up. He attempted to offer excuses, but I interrupted him and told him it was his turn to step up as a brother. I established a modest monthly allowance for my father's fundamental necessities, enough to rent a humble apartment and cover utilities and food. I engaged a social worker to help him locate an affordable place and enroll in any assistance programs he might qualify for. But that is where my aid ceases. No family dinners, no emotional support, no attempt to mend our relationship. He made his choice 7 years ago when he observed me pack my life into my car and drive away. Yesterday, I received a lengthy email from Cecilia. She's still in Florida with her sister, writing about how I need to forgive my father, how he's a broken man, how Dawn manipulated them all. She had the audacity to claim they expelled me because they genuinely believed I would succeed on my own, that they knew I was strong enough to make it independently. I did not respond. They didn't care if I succeeded when I was sleeping in my car, missing meals, and working 2 jobs while trying to remain in school. Some of my extended family members have been posting on social media about my supposed cruelty, how families should forgive each other, how I'm punishing my father for Dawn's actions. They don't seem to recall how they all disregarded my calls for assistance when I was without a home. It's astonishing how individuals who weren't present to help you struggle suddenly possess opinions about how you should allocate your resources. My wife inquired if I was certain about my decision, if I would regret not attempting to restore a relationship with my father. I showed her something I've preserved all these years, the last birthday card my mom ever gave me. Inside, she wrote about how proud she was of my compassionate heart, but reminded me that being kind doesn't mean allowing people to harm me. She desired me to be strong, to advocate for myself, to recognize my worth. I am not being cruel by maintaining boundaries. I am not being heartless by safeguarding myself. I recall those nights in my car, flinching at every sound, attempting to study by the interior light, skipping meals to conserve money. I recall checking my phone daily, hoping my father would call to say it was all a misunderstanding, that I could return home. That call never came. My father made his choice 7 years ago. He chose his new family over his son, and that choice had repercussions. I've built a good life for myself. A loving wife, a beautiful home, a prosperous career, genuine friends like Drake who supported me when my own family would not. I am at peace with my decision. Sometimes the most benevolent action you can take for yourself is to accept that family isn't about lineage or obligation. It's about who stands by you when you require them.